You pull up to your family reunion in a dusty, decade-old Honda Civic with a cracked side mirror and a bumper sticker that someone else put there. You park it right between your sister's brand-new white Mercedes G-Wagon and your other sister's pearl-colored BMW 7 Series. And you just sit there for a second, engine off, hands still on the wheel, and you smile. Not because you're embarrassed, not because you're nervous, but because you know something they don't. You know exactly what's about to happen, and they have absolutely no idea. I sat in that car for almost 3 full minutes. I watched through the windshield as the caterers moved around the backyard of my mother's house, as my cousins hugged each other near the gate, as my Aunt Patricia waved at everyone from the porch like she was royalty. I watched it all, and I felt this quiet, this calm that you only get when you're completely, totally in control of a situation. And then my phone buzzed. A text message. 3 words. We're in position. I took a slow breath, put my phone face down on the passenger seat, opened the car door, and I walked into the most important performance of my entire life. My name is Victoria Renee Calloway, and what I'm about to tell you is not a story about revenge. Well, okay, it's a little bit about revenge, but it's really a story about what happens when the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally decide that your worth is tied to your net worth. It's a story about sisters, real sisters, blood sisters, who looked at me and saw failure, who smiled to my face and whispered behind my back, who laughed at my car, mocked my clothes, and treated me like I was the embarrassing cousin they were stuck with, and not their own flesh and blood. And it's a story about the single most satisfying afternoon of my entire 38 years on this earth. So get comfortable, because we are going all the way back to the beginning, and I promise you, every single second of this is going to be worth it. There are 3 of us. Me, Victoria, the middle child. Then there's my older sister, Danielle, who is 42, lives in a 7-bedroom house in Scottsdale, Arizona, and has never once let any of us forget it. Danielle married a man named Gregory Hartwell, a corporate attorney, when she was 26 years old, and from that point forward, she operated like she had been inducted into some kind of upper-class society that the rest of us were auditioning to join. She's beautiful, polished, and sharp as a blade. She is also, without question, the most insecure person I have ever met in my life. Because people who are truly secure, they don't need to make others feel small. Danielle does. She always has. Then there's Melissa, my younger sister, 34. Melissa is the one people always describe as bubbly and fun, and she is. She genuinely is those things. But Melissa has spent her entire adult life trying to be Danielle's favorite, which means she has spent her entire adult life echoing whatever Danielle says. If Danielle thinks something is tacky, Melissa thinks it's tacky. If Danielle doesn't like someone at the dinner table, Melissa doesn't like them either. Melissa bought her BMW 6 months after Danielle upgraded hers. It wasn't a coincidence. And then there's me, Victoria Renee Calloway, the one who, according to my family, never quite figured it out. See, Danielle married money. Melissa married a real estate developer named Troy Simmons, who was doing well for himself. And me? I had a career. A strange one, by their standards. I worked in international trade consulting, specifically in emerging market infrastructure deals. I spent years building relationships across 3 continents, learning how governments and private equity firms and sovereign wealth funds all talk to each other in the same quiet room. It wasn't glamorous, not visibly anyway. I traveled a lot. I worked strange hours. I didn't go to Dallas or post on social media. I didn't drive a luxury car or wear designer labels to church on Sunday. And so, in my family's eyes, I was the one who hadn't made it. Now, let me be clear. My mother, Loretta Calloway, is a good woman, a genuinely good woman. But she is also a woman of her generation, and to her generation, success looks a very specific way. It looks like a big house. It looks like a nice car. It looks like a husband with a title. And when she looked at her 3 daughters, she saw Danielle and Melissa succeeding, and she saw me drifting. She never said it meanly. That almost made it worse. She said it with concern. She'd call me on Sundays and ask how I was doing in that tone, that soft, worried tone, like she was checking in on someone who'd been sick for a long time and still wasn't getting better. "Victoria, honey, are you still in that little apartment? Victoria, sweetheart, are you eating okay? You look thin in those pictures. Victoria, I just worry about you. Danielle said maybe you should talk to Gregory about some investment opportunities. He knows people." Every single Sunday, for years. And I would smile into the phone, and I would say, "I'm fine, Mama. Everything is great." And I would mean it completely, and she would not believe me at all. What my family didn't know, what I never told them, was that around the time I turned 32, something shifted in my career. I had been working for nearly a decade building relationships in international infrastructure consulting, and one of those relationships, a quiet, careful one I'd cultivated over 4 years with a man named Emmanuel Osei, a Ghanaian-American investor based out of Houston, turned into something extraordinary. Emmanuel had been watching a particular corridor of opportunity in West African energy infrastructure. He needed someone who understood American institutional financing, who had relationships with both federal agencies and private equity funds, and who was patient enough to play a very long game. He asked if I wanted in as a founding partner. I said yes. And then I went home to my small apartment and I prayed over that decision for 2 weeks straight. That was 6 years ago. I won't give you every detail because honestly, some of it I'm still legally restricted from discussing. But what I will tell you is this. That partnership over the course of 6 years became something that I could not have imagined in my wildest dreams. We structured deals. We facilitated financing between governments and American firms. We brought in sovereign partners. We sat in rooms, literal boardrooms, with cabinet ministers and senators and people whose names you would recognize from the news. And somewhere along the way, the money came. Not all at once. That's not how this kind of work operates. It came slowly, and then all at once. The way most things do when you've been patient and disciplined and you didn't quit when it was hard. I bought my first property quietly, then another. I created a holding structure, a series of LLCs that my attorney, James Whitfield, helped me architect. I moved assets around thoughtfully. I lived simply, not because I had to, but because I'd grown up simply and I wasn't performing for anyone. I didn't buy a flashy car. I kept my apartment, though I did eventually upgrade to a very nice one that I never posted pictures of online. I didn't change my lifestyle in any visible way, and my family had no idea. Not because I was hiding from them out of shame, but because I had watched my entire life what happened when people in my family found out someone had money. I watched what Danielle did to our Aunt Patricia when Aunt Patricia's late husband left her a modest inheritance. I watched the subtle shift, the suddenly closer calls, the suggestions, the opinions about how the money should be managed, the quiet competition and quiet resentment. I didn't want that. I wanted to be loved for who I was, plain and simple. But the family reunion changed everything. My mother hosts a family reunion every 3 years. It rotates between Mama's house in Memphis, Tennessee, and various venues depending on the family vote. This year, it was back at Mama's house, a beautiful older colonial home in a good neighborhood on the east side of Memphis that my father bought before he passed and that Mama has maintained with fierce pride ever since. The invitations went out in February for a June date. Mama called me personally, which she always does, and I told her I would absolutely be there. And then Danielle called me. Now, Danielle calling me was not unusual, but the tone of the call was something I hadn't heard in a while. It was generous, warm almost. She was asking how I was doing, really doing, and telling me about her new home renovations. And then she said, very casually, "Oh, Victoria, I'm going to be bringing some of Gregory's colleagues to the reunion this year. They're big deal people, so just, you know, try not to be embarrassing." I remember I was standing at my kitchen counter when she said that, and I set down my coffee mug very carefully. "What does that mean, Danielle?" "Oh, you know what I mean. Just dress nicely. Don't show up in that little car of yours looking like you're coming from a garage sale." She laughed. It was a light laugh, like it was a joke, like I was supposed to laugh too. I didn't.
"I'll see you at the reunion," I said, and I hung up. I stood there in my kitchen for a long moment, and something decided itself inside me, something that had been considering and reconsidering for years just landed, made up its mind, like a key turning in a lock. I picked up my phone, and I called my assistant, Marcus Webb. "Marcus," I said, "I need you to help me plan something." Over the next 3 months, Marcus and I put together what I privately called the reunion protocol. I know that sounds dramatic. I don't care. It was dramatic. It was supposed to be. Here's what you need to understand about my professional life. By the time of that reunion, I had a private security team, 3 men and 1 woman, who worked for me when I traveled internationally. I had relationships with a catering firm in Memphis that handled high-level private events. I had corporate accounts, a black card, and the kind of net worth that comes with what my financial advisor, Dr. Sandra Pierce, politely referred to as significant offshore and domestic holdings. I also had a title. This one requires explanation. About 2 years prior, the government of a small West African nation, as part of a long-term infrastructure partnership our firm facilitated, had awarded me an honorary diplomatic recognition. It was a formal gesture, ceremonial in nature, but legally registered. The title attached to it, when used in formal address, was Your Excellency. I had never used it in my personal life, not once. It felt awkward and strange and completely disconnected from how I saw myself. Until now. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would arrive at the reunion exactly as expected. Old Honda Civic, simple outfit, no jewelry worth noticing. I would walk in just like the sister they all thought they knew, the struggling one, the one who hadn't made it. I would smile, I would hug everyone, I would eat Mama's potato salad and let Danielle's little comments slide off of me like water off glass. And then, at the right moment, the plan would begin. Marcus had arranged for a catering team to arrive mid-afternoon, ostensibly as a gift from a client, a plausible cover that he drafted as a letter I supposedly received. They would arrive with a full spread, additional food, champagne, the works. But among the catering staff would be 2 members of my security team in formal attire. And when the lead server, a man named Charles, who had worked high protocol events for 15 years and knew exactly how to carry himself, when Charles arrived, he would address me exactly as my title required. That was it. That was the whole plan. Simple, clean, devastating. Marcus asked me only once if I was sure. I said yes, without hesitating. I drove to Memphis the morning of the reunion, 6 hours from where I was based. I drove the Honda Civic, my 2013 model with the cracked mirror that I genuinely had not bothered to fix, and I listened to gospel music the whole way, because nothing steadies me like gospel music. I pulled onto Mama's Street around 1:30 in the afternoon. The reunion was in full swing already. There were cars parked up and down both sides of the road. Nice cars, most of them. I could see the G-Wagon from half a block away. I parked the Civic at the end of the street, got out. I was wearing a simple linen sundress in ivory, flat sandals, small gold stud earrings, no bag worth commenting on. Hair natural, clean and pressed, but nothing exceptional. I walked through the gate into the backyard, and within 45 seconds, it started. My cousin Brenda, Danielle's age and one of Danielle's satellites, spotted me from across the yard, and her expression did this thing, this very quick, very readable thing. Her eyes went to my outfit, then flicked back to my face, and she arranged a smile that was just slightly too bright to be genuine. "Victoria, oh my gosh, you made it. All the way from... Where are you living now?" "Still in Atlanta," I said. Right, you drove." And there it was, the slight pause before drove, the implication. "I did," I said. "It was a nice ride." She hugged me. I hugged her back warmly and moved on. Mama found me next, and Mama's hug was real. Mama held me and patted my back and smelled like the jasmine lotion she's worn my entire life, and for a second, everything else fell away. "My Victoria," she said. "Hi, Mama." She held me at arm's length and looked at me the way only mothers can, reading things in your face that you haven't said out loud. "You seem different today," she said. "Do I?" She searched my eyes for a moment. "You seem settled, like you know something." I smiled. "I'm just happy to be home, Mama." She watched me a second longer. Then she let it go and took my hand and led me toward the food tables. I found Danielle and Melissa together near the back patio, exactly where I expected them, holding glasses of white wine, surrounded by Gregory's colleagues and their wives, in the center of the most visible social cluster in the yard. Danielle was in a white halter-neck dress, and she looked stunning. Melissa was in coral, laughing at something someone had said. They saw me at the same time. Danielle's smile was a performance. "Victoria, you're here." She kissed my cheek. I kissed hers. "Great dress," she said, in a voice that said the opposite. "Thank you." Melissa hugged me and said, genuinely or half genuinely, "I'm so glad you came. How was the drive?" "Easy." Gregory, tall, silver-templed, the confident handshake type, shook my hand and said, "Good to see you, Victoria. Still doing the consulting thing?" "Still doing it," I said. "Good for you," he said, in the voice people use when they mean good for you for trying. I smiled at him. "You should try it sometime." He blinked. Melissa made a small sound. Danielle moved the conversation along quickly. Over the next hour, I moved through the reunion doing exactly what I came to do. I talked to relatives I hadn't seen in years. I sat with my Uncle Bernard and listened to his stories. I helped my Aunt Cheryl find chairs for the older guests. I was present. I was genuinely happy to be there, surrounded by people I loved, even when they frustrated me. But underneath all of it, I was watching the clock. My phone said 3:47 p.m. when Marcus sent the message. ETA 12 minutes. I excused myself from a conversation with my cousin Deshawn and went to the bathroom inside the house. I stood at the sink and looked at myself in the mirror for a moment, and I said to my reflection, very quietly, "Okay, Victoria, let's go." I came back outside at exactly 3:58. At 4:01, the side gate of the backyard opened, and in they came. 6 people in total, 3 servers in crisp black uniforms carrying trays, 1 woman with a clipboard, and 2 men, broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in dark suits, moving with the kind of controlled, deliberate precision that you recognize immediately if you've ever been around professional security. They weren't in uniform, but they didn't need to be. Everything about the way they carried themselves said, "We are here for a reason." The backyard went quiet, not silent, but that shift happened where people start noticing and side conversations drop in volume, heads turned. The servers began setting up on a side table, champagne, additional food, a presentation that was clearly several levels above the casual reunion spread already out. People were murmuring. A few of Gregory's colleagues straightened up. And then Charles walked through the gate. Charles was 61 years old, born in Memphis, trained at a protocol academy that served State Department events. He was black, distinguished, silver-haired at the temples, and he wore his dark suit like a second skin. He carried nothing. He walked with his hands clasped at his back, and he surveyed the backyard with one calm, sweeping gaze until his eyes found me. He crossed the yard. The crowd parted without quite realizing it was happening. He stopped in front of me, inclined his head in a formal, practiced bow, and in a clear, carrying voice, not shouting, not performing, just speaking the way a man speaks who has addressed heads of state, he said, "Your Excellency, I apologize for the slight delay. The additional provisions have arrived and are being arranged now. Is there anything else you require before the evening commences?" The silence that fell over that backyard was the most beautiful sound I have ever heard. It was the silence of 37 people doing rapid calculations in their heads. "Your Excellency." I looked at Charles with the calm, familiar nod of someone who is entirely accustomed to this address.
"Thank you, Charles," I said. "Please let the team know we'll do the champagne service at past. "Of course, Your Excellency." He stepped back, clasped his hands, took his position 2 paces behind me and to the left. I turned back to the party, and I looked directly at Danielle. I want to try to describe her face to you. I want to do it justice because it was truly extraordinary. She had gone the color of uncooked dough, not pale, dough. Her eyes had gone very wide and very still. The wine glass in her hand was tilted at a dangerous angle, and she did not appear to notice. Gregory was staring at me with the focused intensity of a man trying to remember if he had ever been told something he should have paid more attention to. Melissa had put her hand over her mouth. My Aunt Patricia, God bless her, said out loud to no one in particular, "What on earth is going on?" My mother was standing near the food table, and when I found her face in the crowd, she was watching me with an expression I will carry for the rest of my life. It wasn't shock exactly. It was something more like recognition, like something she had always half believed had just been confirmed. She put her hand over her heart. She blinked very slowly. I held her gaze for a moment, and I gave her the smallest nod.
What happened next unfolded over about 2 hours, and I want you to understand, I was not cruel. That was never the goal. The goal was truth. The goal was a mirror. My cousin Deshawn was the first person to actually approach me. "Vic," he said, low and careful, what is Your Excellency?" I told him, simply and honestly, about the honorary diplomatic recognition. I explained the title. I explained what the firm did. I watched his face move through confusion and then into something that looked a lot like pride. "You've been doing all this?" he said. "This whole time?" "This whole time," I said. He looked around the yard, then back at me. Then he laughed, a big, real Deshawn laugh, and pulled me into a hug that nearly lifted me off the ground. "That's insane," he whispered. "That is absolutely insane, cousin." Gregory found me next. The handshake this time was different, more careful, more attentive. He was doing what Gregory does, recalibrating, calculating, trying to figure out how to position himself. "Victoria," he said, "I have to be honest, I had no idea the scope of what you were working on."
"Most people didn't," I said pleasantly. "We should talk, professionally, I mean. I have a few clients who—" "I appreciate that, Gregory," I said. "Have Marcus reach out." I handed him Marcus's card. Gregory looked at the card, then back at me.
then at the card again. I moved on. Melissa caught me near the lemonade table. She wasn't composed like Danielle tries to be. Melissa's face is always honest. She can't help it. And her face right now was a mess of emotions. Guilt, I could see. Real guilt. And something else, something smaller and harder, that might have been jealousy fighting against the guilt for space. "Victoria," she said, and her voice cracked a little. Just a little. "Melissa? I didn't know. I had no idea about any of it. I know. I said things. You know I say things. I didn't mean—" I touched her arm. "Melissa, I'm not angry with you." She blinked. "You're not?" "I'm tired," I said honestly. "There's a difference." She started to cry then, just a little, quietly, the way Melissa cries, which is always with one hand pressed to her cheekbone. "I'm sorry. Victoria, I really am sorry." And I believed her, because with Melissa, mostly, the cruelty has never been deep. It's been borrowed. She echoes what she's given. That doesn't make it okay, but it makes it more forgivable. "I know you are," I said, and I hugged her. Danielle was last. I found her, or she found me. It was mutual, I think, near the rose bushes at the far edge of Mama's yard. The rest of the party was louder now. The champagne had been poured. People had loosened. Over by the patio, Uncle Bernard had started telling stories to a small crowd that included 2 members of my security detail who were thoroughly entertained. But here, near the roses, it was quiet. Danielle looked at me for a long moment before she spoke. And I will give her this. When Danielle finally said something, she didn't make excuses. She didn't perform. She said, "I owe you an apology." "Yes," I said, "you do. The things I've said over the years, the way I've talked to you about your car, your apartment, your—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. "I was wrong." "You were wrong," I agreed. "I didn't know." "Danielle," I said her name gently but firmly, "I need you to hear something. You didn't owe me respect because of what I have. You owed me respect because I'm a sister, because I'm a person. The things you said, the car, the clothes, the try not to be embarrassing, none of that was about my finances. That was about you deciding I wasn't worth the same dignity you gave everyone else." She looked at the ground. "The money was never the point," I said. "The point is that even if I had been exactly who you thought I was, even if I was genuinely struggling, genuinely living paycheck to paycheck, I would still deserve to come to my mother's house and not be made to feel like a failure." Danielle was quiet for a long time. The wind moved through the rose bushes between us. Somewhere behind us, someone laughed and a champagne glass clinked. "You're right," she said finally, very quietly. "You're right." I nodded. "Are we okay?" she asked. "We're working on it," I said. "We've been sisters for 38 years. We'll be sisters for longer than that. We'll work on it." She nodded, and I could genuinely see, something shifting in her. Whether it holds, I can't promise you. People are complex. Danielle is complex. But in that moment, near those roses in my mother's backyard in Memphis, she was real. And I think she heard me. Later in the evening, around 7, as the sky went that gorgeous Memphis pink and orange, I found my mother sitting alone on the porch swing. The party had quieted to something comfortable. Music played softly from inside. The smell of food was everywhere. I sat down next to her. She took my hand. We swung in silence for a while. "You should have told me," she said. "I know. Why didn't you?" I thought about it. the real, honest answer. Because I needed to know that you loved me for me, I said, not for what I had or what I achieved. I needed to know that when you called me on Sundays with that worried voice, it was because you loved me, not because you were disappointed. Mama was quiet. And I didn't want the money to change things, I said. It changes things, Mama, you've seen it, in this family and other families. I didn't want to become a different Victoria to the people I love. I just wanted to be Victoria. My mother squeezed my hand hard, the way she used to when I was small and scared. You should have trusted me, she said softly. I know. I leaned my head on her shoulder. I'm sorry. She kissed the top of my head, and we sat there as the sky went dark and the fireflies came out and the music floated through the screen door, and I thought, this is why. This right here is what the money was always supposed to protect. Not a lifestyle, not a reputation. This ordinary, irreplaceable, holy moment on a porch swing with my mother. Victoria Renee, she said. Mama, you never did stop surprising me. I laughed, a real laugh from somewhere deep. Good, I said. I hope I never do. I want to skip ahead just a little because this story doesn't end in that backyard. In the weeks after the reunion, a few things happened. Gregory reached out professionally through Marcus, as I had suggested. After a careful review, we were able to refer him to a colleague whose work was better aligned. We kept it professional. Melissa called me 3 times in the 2 weeks following the reunion. Not to talk about money or status or any of that, just to talk, to catch up, to laugh about old memories and share small moments. One of those calls lasted almost 2 hours, and by the end of it, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt like I had my little sister back, the real one, before all the performance and comparison and keeping up. That meant more to me than any of the rest of it. Danielle and I have been more careful with each other. I won't pretend it was one afternoon in a rose garden and everything healed. That's not how real relationships work. But we are talking, really talking, more honestly than we have in years. She's in therapy now, her own choice, and I respect it. I think she's working on herself. I hope she is. And my mother? Mama came to Atlanta in August. I showed her my actual life, not performed, not filtered. My apartment, my office, the framed photos of the people I've worked with over the years. I cooked for her, and she sat at my kitchen counter and asked me to tell her everything from the beginning. And I did. I sat across from my mother and told her the whole story, Emmanuel and the partnership and the long years of patient work and the slow accumulation of something she could never have imagined her middle daughter building. And she cried through most of it. Not sad tears, just the overwhelmed tears of a woman who raised her daughters as best she could and is now watching one of them become someone she is almost too proud to fully process. When I finished, she reached across the counter and held my face in both her hands. Your father, she said, would have been so proud of you. And that, right there, that was the real thing. The thing I had been working toward all those years. Not the title, not the portfolio, not even the reunion. Just that. That old Honda Civic is still in my possession. I've had the cracked mirror fixed finally, but I kept the car. I'm not ready to let it go. And I may never be. Because that car is a reminder. It reminds me of who I was when I parked it on my mother's street and walked into that backyard knowing exactly who I was, exactly what I had, and exactly how little I needed anyone else to validate it. That car represents every year I spent doing the work quietly, without applause, without recognition, without the approval of people who had decided they already knew my story. It reminds me that the most powerful thing you can possess is a sense of yourself that doesn't depend on what other people see when they look at you. Danielle looked at that car and saw poverty. I looked at it and saw patience. There is a difference, and that difference is everything. If there's something I want you to take from this story, it's that your worth is not visible. It is not in your car or your clothes or your zip code or your title or your bank account. It is not in how many people were impressed when you walked into the room. It is not in whether your family's eyes lit up with pride or dimmed with concern when they thought about you. Your worth is in what you know to be true about yourself at 1:30 in the afternoon when you're parked at the end of your mother's street and you haven't gotten out of the car yet. It's in that quiet, that stillness, that knowing. Hold on to that. No matter who tries to take it from you, even the people you love most, especially the people you love most. My name is Victoria Renee Calloway, and that is my story. Thank you for listening.